Hello, everyone. This is our annual land session workshop of the Board of Directors of the East Bay Regional Park District. It's September 18th, 2020, and we're beginning just a couple minutes after 11 a.m. I would like to ask our recording secretary, Pinnell, to do a roll call of board members.
Thank you, President Corbett. I will start the roll call with Director Coffey, Director Eccles.
Here.
Director Lane.
Here.
Director Rosario.
Here.
Director Waspy.
Here.
Director Wieskamp.
Here.
Director Corbett.
Here.
And one more time, Director Coffey.
He will be joining us very shortly.
Okay.
Thank you very much for calling the roll. Today's meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order, allowing board members to participate remotely. We're also providing live audio and video streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to submit written comments in one of three ways. And I will ask our recording secretary, Pinnell, to please share with the public those three ways.
Okay, first way is via email to Sabrina Pinnell at spinnell@ebparks.org. The second is via voicemail at 510-544-2651 by leaving a message that will be transcribed and given to the board and made a part of the public record. And the third is for those interested in speaking during public comment, you can contact me at Sabrina Pinnell at spinnell@ebparks.org prior to this meeting via email, or use the Zoom link that was provided on the agenda. Public comments will be taken following staff presentations at approximately 11:45.
Thank you very much. So do any board members have any questions about the meeting procedures at this point? Seeing none, a motion to adopt the agenda is in order.
So moved.
I'll move. Second.
Moved by Director Waspy, seconded by Director Wieskamp. Please call the roll on the adoption of the agenda.
Sorry about that mute. Director Eccles?
I'm here.
Director, and what is your position?
Adopting the agenda.
Oh, aye. Sorry.
Okay.
Director Lane?
Aye.
Director Rosario?
Aye.
Director Waspy? Director Waspy?
Aye.
Director Wieskamp?
Aye.
And Director Corbett?
Aye. Thank you very much. The agenda is adopted. I did want to mention that our public comments will be taken at the end of the initial presentations, approximately 11:45-ish. And I will ask Secretary Pinnell, does it look like we have any public comments at this point?
We have not received any public comments at this point.
Okay. And do we have people in the room, so to speak, who may be making comments that we can tell yet?
No public commenters are on the line.
Okay, thank you so very much. All right, I'm going to make a few opening comments and set the stage for today. First, I'll give you a quick overview. As we know, our dedicated acquisition, stewardship, and development staff has been working very hard. And I can tell you that because I know they've been up even late tonight and early this morning working on this really great presentation that we're going to have today. So we want to thank them for all the work they've been doing and not missing a beat over these 6 months, as we deal with the various challenges that confront us. But if you were observing ASD, it would appear that there were no issues because they keep moving along, and we thank them for that. So welcome to the land session. I know that this is one of the workshops that the Board of Directors looks forward to with great anticipation every year. One of the really important roles of the East Bay Park District is to protect and preserve open space and the beautiful lands that the public has put in our care. And this is always a great workshop because we get to talk about all the hard work that has gone into acquiring these properties, the battles, the background work, and some really great important stories about our history that we share with regard to acquiring land. We wouldn't be much of a park district if we didn't have the open space that we do. And a lot of really hard work has gone into that. So we're really, once again, looking forward to that today. I would just mention that we should always remember that a lot of what happens at the Park District is because of things that happened before us. And we should always remember that important history and the hard work people who've come before us have put in to make us what we are today. And I wanted to just mention, in reflecting upon that the year we have been sharing together, that as we continue to acquire our land, that we continue to follow that mission that is stated, that in putting together our strategies for land, we also reflect upon equity and accessibility to ensure that these beautiful lands that we take care of are open to all of our neighbors, all our constituents, all those who come to take refuge in our beautiful lands. And obviously we have the very important mission to preserve those lands for the flora and the fauna and to protect our environment. And, I could go on, but also the important role preserving land plays in fighting climate change. So with that, those are my thoughts for this morning. And I will turn it over next to our AGM of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development, who's been working very hard, I know, because I've been talking to her a lot over the last 24 hours, AGM Christina Kelchner.
Thank you, President Corbett. Good morning, President Corbett and members of the board. Christina Kelchner, Assistant General Manager of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development. Staff does very much look forward to the discussions with the board today, an opportunity to get the board's, some of the board's input and to talk about some of these large land acquisition projects that we have happening. We appreciate the board's continued support for the district's land acquisition program. As Director Eccles mentioned, the past few months with the global COVID-19 pandemic has really been a stark reminder that parks are essential for public health. And the heightened awareness of persistent and social racial inequality in our country has likewise been a sobering reminder that access to parks for all people continues to be a critical part of our mission. In the past month, the recent wildfires and other extreme weather events around the country and the world have been a reminder that parks are essential not just for people, but also for the planet. Protected open space lands serve as carbon sinks that store greenhouse gases that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere and contribute to climate change. The trees and the plants within our parklands remove carbon pollution from the air we breathe. The district's acquisition and protection of ridgelines and wild open spaces helps to keep development away from naturally fire-prone areas. Our marshes provide buffers to sea level rise, and the large areas of natural land that the district acquires and protects helps to provide healthy habitat, places for migration and movement, and the opportunity for wildlife to thrive in the East Bay. The district's acquisition and protection of parklands is needed now more than ever. And the acquisition of parklands in the East Bay has never been easy. It requires patience, courage, tenacity, all of which General Manager Bob Doyle has brought to this work over the past 40 years. Since Mr. Doyle began working on trail acquisitions for Hewlett-Hornbeck back in 1979, the district has grown from about 50,000 acres to over 125,000 acres today. That's over 75,000 acres of parkland protected under Bob Doyle's watch. Sometimes we forget when we're out there hiking and enjoying the scenic views that so many of our parks have incredible stories of how they came to be. Today, we will have an opportunity to hear from the general manager about some of the parks that we have today that were hard-fought, long-term battles. In fact, some of them have taken so long that they're still ongoing, And some of Bob Doyle's presentation will need to be continued into closed session as they involve a review of negotiations and legal strategy. After we hear from General Manager Doyle, we'll also hear from our Chief of Land, Michael Reeves, on more recent acquisitions. I'm very proud of the work that Mike and his team have done. As Director Corbett mentioned, the team has not skipped a beat despite the current challenges. By now, Mike Reeves is well known to the board. He has been with the district for nearly 10 years. He was officially appointed to the Chief of Land position about a year and a half ago. Mike came to the district from Mid-Peninsula Open Space and Trust for Public Lands, and he brings over 25 years of land acquisition expertise to the district. Finally, I want to thank Executive Secretary Sabrina Pennell. Secretary Pennell has been with the Park District and with the ASD division for many years, and her expertise and calm and steady leadership throughout this process has been critical to bringing this workshop to you today. And with that, I will hand it back to Director Corbett. Thank you.
Thank you very much, AGM Kelchner. Very much appreciate those words, and we're all very much looking forward to the next presentation. Thank you so very much for sharing with us the history of Bob Doyle, our General Manager. We all know that he's a very talented person who has led us through thick and thin, through pandemic, through smoke, through many battles to acquire land. And we all know of his great expertise in the acquisition and preserving of land in the Bay Area. The Bay Area wouldn't be what it is today without Bob's work in acquiring these amazing parcels of property. We all also know that Bob is always great at sharing stories and history, and I know that's what he's going to do for us today. And so without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to our General Manager, Bob Doyle, to share with us some of our many important parts of our history. Hi, Bob.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for that. I was not expecting this to be the retirement celebration, but I do appreciate the kind comment. And I also want to recognize the great team under Christina, including Christina and her great introduction. It's really, I know that the land acquisition program is in good hands. There is so much history after over 86 years that how do you slice that in a way that you can hit the high points that are relevant today with all the challenges we have. I was on a meeting this morning with the national leadership from NRPA, National Parks and Recreation Association, and I heard a new word today, and that was called compassion fatigue. Every one of those directors brought up the issue of dealing with COVID and getting the public's work done and providing same places and dealing with the staff fatigue over managing those parks and those people in a compassionate way. And I think that's a great word that we should all be thinking about. Compassion fatigue. But at the East Bay Regional Park District, we continue with our mission. I'm extremely proud of the board and of all the staff keeping the parks open and continuing with the great work that ASD is doing to actually do development projects for public access for all people. But I wanted to start very briefly with the original intention of the East Bay Regional Park District when it was created in the 1930s was actually to figure out how to buy 10,000 acres of surplus property from the East Bay Municipal Utility District. So from day one, the little plan of Olmsted and Hall was a guide to protecting and acquiring land and which property we could and should acquire. That is the root fundamental of the creation of the district. And of course, opening that for the enjoyment, pleasure, and health of the public. So until 1988, any land acquisition money came out of the general fund. It came out of the general fund and land reserve for everything we do. So labor cost, development cost, management of the system, the salaries and everything else were all general fund tax dollars. And the land acquisition program started with really pushing to get other funding through grants and legislation, so we would have additional funding aside from the general fund. But in 1988, which really was truly a landmark year, both Prop 70 in the state of California bond was passed with millions of dollars for land acquisition in state parks and regional parks and local parks. But we were successful for the first time in passing a $250 million bond measure called Measure AA. And that specifically set aside money for land acquisition. Whereas again, that money was, before that time, was competing with everything else we do in the district. So it really is a landmark decision, and the support of the voters to get very tight election, but to get a 2/3 vote at that time was a great accomplishment. And I honor all the people who worked on that at the time. I specifically want to mention Jerry Kent, who was acting general manager. And it really led us on the way to actually successive additional measures we've taken to our constituents to support our park system, the most recent being Measure FF. So having a set aside of specific dollars, and I remember very specifically when I wrote that part of the bond measure, that board members said, now we expect you to triple that money. So for every dollar we got from Measure AA, we were supposed to get a dollar from the state and a dollar from the feds. And that's been the mission for the Park District for a long time. Bill Mott called it squeezing water out of rocks, getting that money for those projects. So there's a core value of not just buying land, but getting the money to buy the land, because it always costs more. It always goes up over time. But there are two ways that we acquire property. The simplest is we have some money, we have a property we're interested in, we contact the property owner, that property owner says, I'm willing to talk to you. We appraise the property. We are required by law to pay appraised fair market value, not more. And we do those appraisals, we review them, we do outside private appraisals, and then we get authorization from the board to make an offer. That's the most common, and you'll hear a lot of that today on the accomplishments of the land department. But the other way we acquire property is really more difficult and longer term. There are many of the 33 cities, almost every city wants to provide more housing, more economic development. And many times the areas that a developer or property owner has is in conflict with our own goals. That may be sensitive habitat, it may be scenic land, may be a parcel that the district has identified as a high priority, but that the district has absolutely no legal authority to do land use planning from a zoning real estate standpoint. That is all done individually by each city through their zoning and development process in the two counties. So we are not allowed to say we want to acquire this property and it should be open space, therefore it's open space. We have to work with the cities. And to do that sometimes is a major conflict with those cities who want to see development and who are being pushed very hard by real estate interests to make as much money as possible. And today, the challenge really is the need for additional housing. We hear that, we hear the laws changing in Sacramento to encourage housing, but something that I want to admit we never really thought about as a central point 30 years ago, 40 years ago, even back the very beginning of the district, that many of the lands that the cities have proposed or developers have proposed were in the ridgelands. And we know no clearer message than today that development in these rugged areas of the ridgelands is very dangerous. And I'm extremely proud that this district has acquired many of the early development proposals in rugged ridgelands that are scenic, full of wildlife, but also really prone to fire. And I can calculate close to 6,000 units that would have been developed at Vargas Plateau, Hayward Hills, around Mount Diablo, Pleasanton Ridge, and along the shoreline that would be fire prone. And today those are parks. And we have a huge responsibility to manage that vegetation, which we are, and to protect both those lands, but the adjacent properties to that. But had there been houses in all those areas, we would be seeing a much worse fire situation, including the burning of homes like we're seeing in other parts of California. The Lightning Complex, especially in Santa Clara County, almost 400,000 acres, did not destroy any personal homes. That's a miracle. And that's because that land has not been developed into housing. And so I want to make that point. I'd like to go over some of that specifics on some of those projects to remind the board and the public watching that some of these projects to protect land have taken 30 years to get to a compromised position where we have a park addition and maybe some additional housing. So Brian Holt, I know, has a quick slide presentation to do some examples, and I'd like to have Brian share that screen with those maps. And we can go to the first map.
Oh,
Doing great.
okay, there we go. Sorry about that.
So this is the area called Walpert Ridge, adjacent above Garin Park. And at the bottom of that map with all the colored parcels on it, you can see the original Garin Park. But in the 80s and 90s, that Walpert Ridge area was proposed for 5,000 units. It is the highest elevation above the park. Today it is called, most of it's called the Stonebrae Golf Course and Development, but it started at a proposal by the city in their zoning for over 5,000 units. And the district was able to acquire some additional land up there quickly in front of that and work with the city of Hayward, to try to protect additional lands and add it to the park. Today, that project, after over 25 years, has a total of about 700 units, down from 5,000 units. Had those units been approved at the original numbers, those would be on top of the ridge in rugged areas without any fire buffers around them. And we were able to reach a compromise. But I also want to say this was a struggle. I want to specifically compliment the Hayward Planning Association and Sherman Lewis, professor at Hayward State, retired, who spent most of his life advocating for the protection of Walpert Ridge and the areas above Garin Park. Had it not been for his litigation and his persistence, we would not have the properties that we have today above the original Garin Park. But it was a compromise. And so development was approved, but it was approved at a much lower level. At some point, we were in a position where we were trying to get the Bay Area Ridge Trail, and we could not reach agreement with the city nor with the developer. And the district at the time was looking at potential litigation to challenge the CEQA impacts and the planning approvals. And we declined to do that. Well, we can discuss that in closed session as a litigation item in the past, but we declined to do that. We ended up with a compromise that the Bay Area Ridge Trail literally goes through the golf course. Not something we wanted, not something valuable for golfers, but that was the impasse, and the city approved the project with that alignment of the trail. And we've received many complaints, both by golfers and by board members, of why does the trail go through the golf course? And that's because we could not convince the developer or the city of Hayward to do a different location. So that's an example of a 50-50. We got a lot of open space. We got some beautiful parkland attached to it, but we did not get, and we got the trail, but the trail design is not what we wanted. It is a compromise, and compromise means neither party gets exactly what they want, but it was a very big fight and a very big challenge. We'll go on to the next project. This is the much discussed and current Wilder Ranch or Gateway Sibley property. Bill Mott talked about acquiring this property when he, all the way back when he was the director in the 60s and then in state park director in the 70s, that he thought more land should be added to Sibley. And this project went on for 25 years. It started with not an 18-hole golf course, which have filled in the creeks and canyons to be created, and 16 years of litigation, and finally over 1,400 acres of permanently protected open space, much of which will be donated or dedicated to the East Bay Regional Park District. Again, I want to acknowledge a very specific person, Mimi Wilson and SOS Gateway Valley, who fought that fight to preserve as much of this land as possible for all those years. Again, citizen advocacy helped guide the process, not just the park district advocacy, not just the city, and residents of that community rose up and pushed to reduce the impact of that development. You can see how spread out that is, where the golf course was in there. Today, it is a small number of developed homes, no golf course, and again, over 1,400 acres of permanent habitat protected, 25 years. And I also want to thank Linda Chavez, who was a planner in our land acquisition department, who basically her entire career worked on both the Hayward project and this project to try to work out and compromise and get some beautiful property preserved. We will be accepting the Western Hills portion in the near future. That will be almost, in total, this almost doubles the size of a Sibley Regional Preserve. So a hard fought, very difficult choice and compromise. The land comes for free, but it comes without, it's not free from the standpoint of all the years we advocated to see more land protected. Next slide, please. This is a more recent project, nevertheless important. This is the Faria Preserve in San Ramon at the very southern tip of Las Trampas Ridge. And the original development would have had a much bigger footprint that you see on the map. And the EBRPD and the Sierra Club filed suit against the city of San Ramon to see more land protected and reduce the ridgeline impacts. This project is now an extremely visible and controversial project, even today, from the community that can see the top of the ridge. But we got a very large dedication. We got the trail, Calaveras Trail connection in a staging area, and they had to reduce the development. At first, there was absolutely no support for the Sierra Club or for the Park District to make any changes to this project. They wanted development, and they wanted the maximum development they could get up there. So working with partners in advocacy, but actually filing a lawsuit over the lack of mitigating the impacts of this development allowed us to negotiate in a more serious manner with the pressure of the court upon both parties to reach agreement. Next slide, please. We've all are extremely proud of the Dotson Family Marsh in the city of Richmond, to honor the great family and a great board member, Whitney Dotson, we all miss. But a little story here is that when I was a ranger at Point Pinole, I would go to the Richmond City Council meetings and sit next to this woman knitting. Her name was Jean Siri. She became a board member and was a lifelong advocate for public shoreline access. And at that time in 1976, there was a proposal for an airport on the then Bruner property, now Dotson Marsh. After that, the property passed hands repeatedly, and the Edgewater Technology Park was proposed, mixed-use development. A transit village was proposed on this project. And finally, the board said, we're going to go to court. We're going to find the money, and it's too important that we're going to use the power of eminent domain to go to court and to acquire this property, and a jury will decide the value. I want to say that the city of Richmond, including a council member, was the witness for the defendant, which is the property owner, and said in court through testimony that the city believes the property is worth $100 million in future tax revenue. Obviously, that became a huge challenge for our legal team. And I want to recognize the person I've worked with for over 20 years, 25 years, Todd Amspoker, is our special counsel for land. And this was the proposal that they had looked at. The city was in favor of it. There was even a vision that there would be a BART station on the tracks there, something like that. But we were able to acquire it. It cost over $8 million. And today it is one of the most fantastic marsh restorations in the Bay. It includes the transitional habitat into sea level rise as a part of that plan, and a wonderful public access component of the Bay Trail across these restored marshes. A long, hard history, all the way back to 2002 and before. Next slide, please.
That's it, Bob. That's the last slide we got on this part
Okay.
for the open session.
Okay, so there are other properties that will continue in closed session that are either our current litigation, and we'll discuss that as part of the negotiations ongoing. But I really think it's important to see the long-term effort that we have worked to acquire properties that we can't buy because we don't have a willing, well, we can if we go to court, and that's costly. And by law and by policy of this board, any use of eminent domain is a method of last resort. And I will say this publicly, that we are required to pay highest and best use in our appraisals. And the biggest issue when somebody says to the park district, you should acquire this property no matter what, is a quote that a good attorney told me one time that says, here's how it goes. Had it not been for the park district taking our property, we would have gotten our development approved. So you should give us the value of that approved development. Really important and true. So that's something that we really have to be careful about when we look at any decision as far as litigating to protect the public's right to acquire property. And we have to do that following the law and the regulations, but those regulations are to protect the property owner. And condemnation or eminent domain is a very complicated and challenging process, including counter claims and things like that. And so I think that's important to realize. Excuse me. But those are examples of a whole nother side of the park district's preservation and of our effort. And that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. GM. I know we all appreciate those hard-fought battles, and it's truly impressive. It's truly impressive that the work you have been involved with on behalf of the East Bay Regional Park District. And, you know, obviously, we all enjoy living in this beautiful part of the country, but a big part of that is because that land has been saved and protected, and the battles have been fought and they have been won. So we thank you for that. And
Thank you,
so
President Corbett. And just another comment that we never did this alone. We had strong support and very specific support in the community. You know, it has to be driven from the community, and that's really critical. And a couple other people I want to mention is Bob Walker, who went around the Park District taking pictures of these beautiful places and then went around doing slideshow about why they should be preserved. We did not do that. He did that. And he was the chair of the Sierra Club Conservation Committee at the time and really helped us pass Measure AA and made and other projects. So that citizen advocacy is the beginning. The idea of the Park District started with that citizen advocacy, and it's so important. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, but happy to move on. And I appreciate the compliments, Ellen, but it was a team effort all the way through. Hewlett Hornbeck, other people, all through the land department years. You know, most of this land was acquired with a land department of about 5 people. And it's pretty amazing. I want to also thank Pat O'Brien, who embraced my recommendation to create an interagency planning department, now part of the full planning department, in the early 90s, so that we would really pay attention to what was going on our boundaries. We do a lot of internal in the parks planning, but on the external, what are the cities doing? What are the impacts? What is that land? And I think that's a big part of our success.
thank you. Thank you so much also for naming some of those people who are also part of our history, the public advocates that fought hard to keep those open space lands. It is truly remarkable. And I know you could talk on, and I know of a few of those fights where people were on one side, and from the other side of it, from, like, say, for example, the city council side, where there were fights, not popular fights, where people took on developments and won. And it was so nice to know that, coming full circle, that somewhere out there was the East Bay Regional Park District to make sure that there was a way to save those lands after some of those developments in sensitive areas were no longer to be. So what a great, wonderful thing that the Park District provides for this Bay Area community.
Thank you. And we also had the dump wars, where everybody wanted to site their landfill in Contra Costa County, including Round Valley and Black Diamond and Crockett Hills, were all proposed as landfills. And we defeated those and acquired every one of those properties. So again, really, yes, a lot of things ended up on that side of the acquisition side.
Yes, and also preserve pieces of land that maybe weren't taken care of so well, and the Park District takes them, turns them around, and turns them into beautiful parkland, or receives land that's coming back from the federal government back to the people, and the Park District steps in and takes care of those and turns them back over to the people. So it's really a really beautiful thing. And I know as a board, we're all very proud to be associated with you, Bob, and the work of the Park District. So thank you.
It's an honor.
So we could have some questions, but we also have, could maybe ask questions later, because we do have, what's the pleasure of the board? Our next presentation is Mike Reeves, who will be bringing us our most current projects that we're working on over the last year. So maybe we have questions after that. Does that sound good? Sound good to everybody? Okay, I would like to then introduce Mike Reeves, who will give us the latest news on our latest acquisitions. And Michael, please take it away.
Thank you, President Corbett. Good afternoon, President Corbett, members of the board. Mike Reeves, Chief of Land Acquisition. And I want to say before starting that I think what struck me most about the general manager's comments, and also the impressions I had and continue to have upon coming to the Park District about 9 years ago, is the courage and tenacity that the board of directors has shown to take on these battles and to see them through when there's an awful lot of treasure and blood to sacrifice to get us to these amazing accomplishments. So it's been, as Bob said, and he's got a lot more years than me at the Park District, but it's also very much as much my honor to be working for this board and with this team. So with that,
Thank you, Mike.
I will share my presentation screen. Does everybody see the slide?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, you can see the slide.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a view from a recent acquisition as a dedication of land from the Northern California Laborers Union. This is in the hills above the San Ramon Valley, and this is looking to the north and east. You see Mount Diablo off there in the distance. The land acquisition program is responsible for acquiring new land and land rights. It's the raw material that is the basis for the park planning, stewardship, trails development, capital projects delivery, and park operations that follows. Before we go into closed session to review current and prospective land and trail acquisition opportunities, I would like to review with you highlights of the land program's accomplishments of the past year. But first, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues in the land acquisition department who collectively manage a growing portfolio of increasingly complex projects and provide a range of right-of-way services that permits the Park District to carry out its policies and programs in keeping with the district's master plan. The body of work includes jumping on new acquisition opportunities as they arise, shepherding existing projects to completion, and supporting the district's capital projects program in securing the land rights necessary to move those projects forward. The staff that gets the Park District's business done in this realm includes real property specialist Linda Wu, with almost 30 years of experience in public sector, real property, and land acquisition work, 29 of those years with the Park District. Linda has a considerable breadth of knowledge of all manner of right-of-way agreements and transactional work, and her versatility is a tremendous asset to the land program. Next, we have real property specialist Sarah Reek, now in her third year in this capacity after promoting from administrative analyst 2, and whose natural inquisitiveness and initiative has pulled her inexorably into increasingly complex project work. Next in our team is administrative analyst 2, Philip Coffin, who in the past 2 years since joining the team has not only taken ownership and improved upon the administrative and project support functions unique to this department, but in drawing on his considerable research and customer service skills, has also become a resource for solving ownership and land rights questions that arise throughout the year from inside and outside of the agency. And then finally, our newest member of the team, senior real property specialist Rachel Lem, who joined us in July of last year and brings a wealth of experience in land acquisition project work from her time with the Trust for Public Land, a national land conservation organization based in San Francisco. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can ask my team to share their videos and to give the board a wave. The board doesn't have a lot of opportunity to see many of the staff of the Park District who are laboring in the trenches day in and day out. And so hopefully these are all familiar faces to you, if not for some time. So we've got, again, there's Linda. I see Linda. I see Philip. There's Sarah, and there's Rachel. So thank you all for your continued good work in helping to expand our regional park and trail system to better serve East Bay communities.
Very nice to see you all.
All right, then. Let's go back to the presentation. All right, turning now to a retrospective of our team's accomplishments. Over the past 14 months since last year's land session workshop, the land acquisition program closed escrow on 482 acres of new parkland and trail easements to preserve open space and secure the property rights needed to improve recreational access to our parks. During this period, the Park District also obtained the use rights to over 2,200 acres of land to put our newest regional park on the map and connect our newest regional shoreline to San Francisco Bay. An additional 626 acres of future parklands have been optioned or are otherwise in contract to acquire. The blue and red dots on the overview map show the locations of the 22 acquisition projects spread across the Park District service area that were completed or went into contract over the past 14 months. And today I'd like to highlight 8 of the completed projects that represent a cross-section of the diversity of the work we are accomplishing and the communities in which the work is being done. In July of last year, the Park District formally took possession of the first phase of the former Concord Naval Weapons Station land transfer from the Navy to the National Park Service to us, allowing us to assume operational and management responsibility of these lands. Much has already been said about this monumental accomplishment that is creating our newest regional park in the hills above Concord. But I start our year in review with this project because it was the biggest number in the Park District's land acquisition achievements this past year, both in size, 2,216 acres of dramatic open space landscapes steeped in history and cultural significance, but also in years of effort to achieve this milestone. And while it took a small army, if the Navy will forgive the reference, and leadership by our board and executive team to get us to this milestone, much of the laboring in the trenches was performed by the Park District's planning and GIS staff, in particular our Chief of Planning and GIS, Brian Holt. The transfer of the ownership of these lands from the National Park Service to the Park District is anticipated to occur sometime within the next year as the final step in the public benefit conveyance process. Looking around our service area, we had several projects that succeeded in protecting open space landscapes. At Bishop Ranch Open Space Regional Preserve, through a dedication of lands from the Northern California Laborers Union. At Los Trompas Wilderness Regional Preserve, purchase of land from Simon family. And at Morgan Territory Regional Preserve, the purchase of the Blocking Family Trust property in partnership with the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy. Looking first at the dedication of land at Bishop Ranch, the Park District accepted this 176 acre dedication of open space located high on the hills flanking the west side of the San Ramon Valley. The addition of these lands to our park system was made possible by a three-party agreement between the Park District, the City of San Ramon, and the property owner, which agreed to dedicate the property to the Park District in exchange for the city adjusting its urban growth boundary to encompass the footprint of the existing construction craft training center that has been operated by the Laborers Union since the 1970s. The dedication area is a mosaic of grassy rolling hills, canyons, and wooded creeks, and contains the lower reaches of Big Canyon, an area recognized as having high scenic and conservation value. The higher elevations on the site provide sweeping views of Mount Diablo and the San Ramon Valley. A trail easement included in the dedication will allow the future construction of a trail to provide public recreational access into the dedication area from San Ramon's Centennial Park and West Side Drive. Turning next to Las Trampas Open Space Regional Preserve, the Park District purchased the 7-acre Simon property located along the northwestern boundary of the park and adjacent to the former Lothamer property purchased by the Park District in 2015 as a potential future site for developing a staging area to open up this area of the park to public recreational trail use. Acquisition of this vacant property with its prime hilltop home site prevented the possibility of a residence being developed that would sit directly above the potential staging area site and also degrade view sheds from within the park. Next, at Morgan Territory Regional Preserve, the Park District purchased the 3.25-acre Blocking Family Trust property located along Morgan Territory Road and fronting on Marsh Creek. Acquisition of the property served to remove a private inholding that is surrounded by protected parkland, preventing the possibility of the site being developed and the habitat fragmentation and impacts to Marsh Creek that would result. This acquisition was accomplished in partnership with the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy, which since 2007 has provided over $61 million in federal and state grant funding to support the Park District's acquisition and protection of East County landscapes with important habitat values and opportunities to develop regional trail networks and other passive recreational uses. Now we're going to look at a suite of trail easement acquisitions this past year that served to expanding our regional trail network. At Tassajara Regional Trail, through a dedication of trail easement from a private developer, along the San Francisco Bay at Point Malati, in this instance requiring a condemnation of land through an eminent domain action to acquire the trail easement necessary to close a key gap. And at Rancho Pinole Regional Preserve, a partnership project with John Muir Land Trust that included the conveyance of trail easements and conservation easements to the Park District. First, at Tassajara Creek Regional Trail in City of Dublin. Earlier this year, the Park District accepted the dedication of a trail easement from Truemark Homes, which is developing the Wallace Ranch residential subdivision located in the City of Dublin along the Alameda-Contra Costa County line. Truemark has constructed a trail segment running along the eastern edge of the development. However, the trail improvements stop just short of the county line, and you can see that evidence there in the photo. And there is no provision in the city's conditions of approval for the housing development to extend the trail into Contra Costa County across an adjacent parcel that is also owned by Truemark Homes. The trail easement dedication by Truemark will allow the Park District to extend the trail into Contra Costa County, where it will connect with a planned trail extension through the adjacent U.S. Army Camp Parks property. Truemark also donated $35,000 to the Regional Park Foundation to contribute to the construction costs of this additional trail segment. Out at Point Malati along the Point San Pablo Peninsula shoreline, the Park District is well underway on plans to construct an extension of the San Francisco Bay Trail from Miller Knox Regional Shoreline north along the Point San Pablo Peninsula shoreline to open this largely unknown but scenic stretch of North Bay shoreline to public recreational access. In 2014, we acquired a trail easement from Chevron that provided most of the right-of-way necessary to construct the first 2.5 miles of the trail. There remained a tiny gap in the right-of-way needed for the project, where the planned trail alignment crosses the corner of a privately owned section of the shoreline at Castro Point. Despite years of good faith efforts to negotiate the purchase of a trail easement, our purchase offers were rejected by the property owners, and in May 2018, the Park District Board of Directors adopted a resolution of necessity to acquire the trail easement by eminent domain. A final order of condemnation was handed down by the court in August of last year, and the trail easement was conveyed to the Park District. Moving back into the interior at Rancho Pinole Regional Preserve. In 2019, the John Muir Land Trust purchased the 281-acre Almond Ranch property located between Rancho Pinole and the Mount Wanda area of the National Park Service's John Muir National Historic Site. The ranch was purchased as part of the Land Trust's ongoing efforts to preserve the open space landscapes along Franklin Ridge and provide opportunities to create regional trail connections. The Park District partnered in this effort, initially pledging $1 million in seed money towards the $4 million purchase price of the property, and ultimately contributing $982,000 in Measure WW funds to close the funding gap. In exchange for this financial contribution, John Muir Land Trust granted to the Park District a conservation easement together with a blanket trail easement over the entire ranch that will allow us to develop and operate regional trail connections through the property, including a future segment of the Bay Area Ridge Trail. And the last project I'd like to highlight this morning is along the water's edge at Judge John Sutter Regional Shoreline. Here, the Park District negotiated land use agreements with Caltrans to expand the footprint of this emerging and exciting new shoreline park to over 12 acres, encompassing several major park facilities, including the 24,000 square foot renovated Bridge Yard building, a new 66 space lighted parking lot with restrooms, recently completed by Caltrans, to serve as a staging area for the Alex Zuckerman Bay Bridge Trail and provide parking for visitors to the park. And the recently constructed observation platform extending 600 feet into the bay, constructed by Caltrans on the footings of the old Bay Bridge span. The new observation platform and paved path from the Bay Bridge Trail will provide a dramatic connection to the bay for visitors to the Shoreline Park. And staff anticipates that the Park District will be ready to take possession of the shoreline area and new park facilities later this year. And with that, as the conclusion of my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer questions from the board.
Thank you very much, Michael. Great presentations representing a ton of work. So thank you for everybody involved with that. It's great to see our most recent successes as well, and more to come. And with that, this will be a time for comments or questions, board members. Would anybody like to ask questions or comments of the general manager or of our manager of acquisitions, Mike Reeves?
I agree with you, Ellen. Great job on everybody's point. I've known Sherman Lewis for years, and it's always good to see all sides of Sherman and to hear his value, because he is a persistent person. And then Bob, it was so great to hear about your companion knitting beside you, Jean Seary. Two very tenacious people who once they got an idea, they didn't let go. And we ought to be very, very grateful for people like that. Thanks for the great part of just knowing and reminding us of what's come before us. I appreciate it.
Yes, I think both the individuals Ann mentioned would be so touched that you spoke about them in your presentation today, without a doubt. Director Lane and then Director Rosario.
Yeah, on the that beautiful laborers piece that they showed, that they had a wonderful picture of, showing the green and then Bishop Ranch and Mount Diablo. That happened very quickly. You know, some of these things we have as a twinkle in land acquisition's eye, and then they come together. And I was part of a meeting which included the city manager for San Ramon, and Bob was there, and they were talking about a couple of kind of tricky things having to do with the property and the urban limit line. And at that meeting, that entire project was resolved. And this beautiful open space is the result. So thank you to all of staff for that piece.
We heard from your kitty. Thank you. Your kitty agrees.
Yay, open space.
Thank you.
+1. Yeah.
Thank you. Director Rosario.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate the history of the land acquisitions in the Park District. But also just wanted to call out the work of Linda Wu, who I've had the pleasure of working with directly. She's incredibly competent and knowledgeable and very nice to work with. And I also wanted to call out the fact that Sarah Reek has, when she first started, she was I think she was an SOA at working for operations, and Philip Coffin started in recreation. And I haven't had the pleasure to work with Rachel Lamb, but I'm sure she wouldn't be part of the team unless she was as an excellent credentials as well. So I just wanted to shout out to them for their work and their ability to rise from their original classifications and to the betterment of the Park District.
Thank you, Director Rosario, for that, for those kudos. And this team is what keeps me coming back for more every day. So yes, very much appreciated.
Great.
Director Eccles.
Yeah, I'd like to echo some of the comments of the other board members, particularly with respect to the history of these land acquisitions, especially as a new board member. It's very helpful to hear about the history, as well as the tenacity and determination on the part of the Park District and the community in terms of preserving this land for future generations. So thank you, and you know, good to hear. Thank you for the good work.
Thank you. Director Waspy.
Oh no.
You're muted again, Dennis.
Oh no. Poor Jenna.
There you go. Yay.
Just following up, staff has done a tremendous job. The history of the Park District is so great. But as the last person to speak here almost, I'd like to give a shout out to the constituency and the electorate that continually will support us through Measure AA, Measure WW, Measure FF, San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. People like our product, and I think we prove that we can deliver on their trust.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Waspy. So true. Big thank you to our voters and taxpayers who make this all possible. Thank you. Any other board members with comments? Mr. GM, would you like to add anything else?
No, we'll continue the conversation after your break and any public comments. There are certainly a lot more things to update you on.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to ask Secretary Pennell, do we have anybody wishing to make public comments at this time?
Director Corbett, we had no public comments submitted via email or voicemail prior to the 3 p.m. deadline on Thursday, September 17th. Any emails that have come in after this date will be organized and given to the board after this meeting. All public comment email will become a part of public record. In addition, we do see one caller on the line that has not been identified. So we will unmute you now, and you can open your video, but please announce your name and begin speaking. After your comment is completed, I will mute you. You may remain in the meeting. However, we ask that you stay on mute without commenting, and your video will be stopped. If you prefer to watch later, you can go to the youtube.com EBRPD Clerk of the Board to watch the rest of the meeting today. So we will try to unmute you now. Going to give them one more chance to speak up. We just see iPhone on here. There's no number or name. And because we did not receive an email or any additional notice, we will go ahead and I will let you take it from here, Director Corbett.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary Pennell, and thank you so much for all of your support to make sure that we give an opportunity for the public to be heard, even though it seems they are not ready to be heard today. So thank you very much for helping with this meeting. So with that, we'll close public comments for now, and we will adjourn the meeting. This meeting is being, the first part of the meeting, the open session, is being adjourned at 12:10. We will reconvene in closed session at 12:30. So we have a little bit of a break. And board members, I believe you all have the links to take you to the Zoom for the closed session. If you do not, please contact me or Secretary Pennell, AGM Ocker, or anyone else that you know
Anybody out there?
that can help you. Clerk Knight, Burial Knight, I think is out there too. There's plenty of people out there to help us. So with that, we'll adjourn this first part of the meeting. We'll see you in closed session. And if you do need help reconnecting, just let us all know. All right, see you in a little bit at 12:30. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Take care.
you.
See you in a minute.